over 2,000 known plant viruses, and this is especially destructive to agriculture. And common signs of infection are bleached or brown spots on leaves and fruits, stunted growth, or damage to the flowers and roots. They have the same structure and mode of replication as animal viruses do, and most have a helicocapsid, sort of like what Maggie said, the tobacco mosaic virus. And plant viruses, they're spread by two major routes: the horizontal route and horizontal transmission and vertical transmission. Horizontal transmission is a virus that's transmitted to the plant through like an external source, and the plant is susceptible to damage if the outer layer or the epidermis is damaged. And herbivores can transmit viruses from plant to plant. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, like, for example, at the Morton Arboretum and the Chicago Botanic Gardens, they have very strict rules for the people that are working there, that their garden tools, much like, you know, when you, if a person goes to a salon to get their hair cut, you know, they have that disinfectant for all their instruments. Well, they have to do that with the plant stuff, because most people don't realize you can easily, number one way to transmit viruses from one plant to another is pruning shears and garden instruments. And of course, like what you're saying there with the herbivores.
Yeah, they can be transmitted through that way, or like if herbivores eat an infected plant and then it goes and like eats part of another infected plant, that virus will be passed on to the new plant. And then a virus can also be transmitted through vertical transmission, and that's if like a plant inherits a virus from the parent. And so it could be like passed on through like a seed or a fruit to the new plant, or asexual propagation, where like scientists, they make new plants like through cutting, and that's like taking part of a plant and cutting it and regrowing it.
Yeah, it's called grafting.
Okay.
It's where what they do. The reason they do that is if, let's say, in a very colder region, they'll take a native tree that can handle our winters, and they'll take a prized, let's say, apple tree, and they can make a V-cut in both trees, and then just take the top of the one tree and transplant it onto the rootstock of the native tree and let it heal, and then that, you know, creates a hybrid that can withstand winters and produce good fruit.
So if you do that to a plant that has a virus in it, it's going to be passed on, obviously, to the new plant. And then this is just a picture explaining vertical and horizontal transmission. So inside is the virus, and so say this is the parent, it'll be passed down to each daughter or daughter plant. And then horizontal, the virus is transmitted from an external source, and then it's combined with the new plant to create a plant with the virus. Okay, once the plant is infected, the virus begins to replicate, and it spreads throughout the plant by plasmodesmata. And plasmodesmata is microscopic channels that go through the cell walls in plants that enable communication and transportation. Viroids are dwarf from viruses. They're circular RNA molecules that infect plants. They can replicate in host cells by using the host cell enzymes. And the typical sign of this kind of virus is stunted growth. And an example of this is Kadang Kadang. So, yeah. And it killed millions of coconut plants in the Philippines.
Yeah, an interesting thing about Kadang Kadang is that it's of very big economic importance, because like the coconuts, bananas, the other trees that are similar to that, when they get this viroid, early symptoms look like heat stress, so it can go undetected. And by the time it's diagnosed, where much of the crown of the plant is already dead, it's already spread to neighboring trees, and there is no cure. So the only recourse is to burn the tree to the ground. Hopefully, did it before it spread to the neighboring trees. It'll kill entire fields, entire groves. You know, so by early detection is important, so they can get rid of the tree right away. But, you know, like I said, by the time, you know, it all happens, you know, by the time the tree is already dying, it's already had a chance to spread to all the other trees in the area. So yeah, it's a big one.
Does anyone have any questions on plant viruses? No?
Now that's a viroid, not a virus.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But, and then, oh yeah.
What's the difference between viroids and viruses?
Viroids, they like dwarf from viruses, and viroids, they're just circular RNA molecules.
Yeah, no protein coat. Strictly just RNA, whereas a virus is what?
They have a protein code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do they, like, infect the plants opposed to, like, a virus infecting, like, an animal?
Well, they infect it the same way.
Yeah. Good question too, thank you.
Can anyone tell me what horizontal transmission is?
It's like where the virus is like transmitted by like external sources.
Yeah, and then vertical transmission is they're transmitted through the parent. Okay. Prions. Okay, prions are infectious proteins. They cause many degenerative brain diseases in animals, and many people think that prions are the cause of Alzheimer's and dementia. And what's strange about them, they can be transmitted through food. And so an example of a prion like outbreak is the Kuru disease, and it was an epidemic spread amongst natives in New Guinea, and scientists found out that it was spread through rituals of cannibalism.
Yeah, and what the Aborigines did was to honor and revere their dead. They would eat their dead, so in a way they were living on through the living people. So they're doing this as a means of respect. And what would happen is the men of the tribe would eat the muscle tissue, the women of the tribe would eat the brain, and it was predominantly a disease found in the women. And they called it the shivering disease because as the brain was degenerating, they become uncoordinated. They would have a lot of shaky, jerky movements, so they called it the shivering disease. And when they discovered this and they no longer practiced the ceremonial cannibalism, the disease sharply dropped off because prions are only spread through infected nervous tissue that's in the food.
How does like the first person get infected then? If they're
Like the first person
Yeah,
ever to
like-
get a prion.
no, like if they're eating that person, like how does he get it?
Mutation.
In the genome?
Mm-hmm. There's a number of prion diseases in different animals, but I'll get to that later. I want to let them finish because I don't know if I'm going to.
Okay, so prions, they act slowly. They have an incubation period of 10 years. So a person could be infected with a prion and not know it until 10, 15 years later. And it's virtually indestructible. Like there's no known cure, and it cannot be killed through like excessive heating or anything. Once a prion gets like into the human or the animal, it cannot replicate. So what a protein is, it's a misfolded form of a protein normally found in a brain cell. So once it gets in the brain and infects a brain cell, it changes the brain cells into like a prion, and it keeps doing that until they aggregate and form like a prion complex.
Right. Yeah. A little thing you mentioned. Yeah. It's not that it changes the brain cell into it. It changes the normal brain proteins inside the nerve cells into more prions, and then it forms that complex. And once the complex forms, the brain cells die, creating sponge-like holes in the brain.
So is it like a tumor?
No, spongiform.
Okay, and then this is just a picture of how like prions work. Once the prion is infected, it transforms the brain cells, and then it forms the new complex. Okay, and then I have a video on how